Grant Underwood gripped his phone, his knuckles white, as he stared at the empty side of the bed. The sheets remained crisp and untouched, exactly as they had been when he made the bed that morning. At 34, he had built what he thought was the perfect life. A successful architecture firm, a beautiful wife, and a circle of loyal friends. Now, at 2:47 a.m., that illusion was shattering with each unanswered call. He pressed Cora's number again, his jaw clenched tight. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. "Hey, baby." Cora's voice came through, the words stretching and slurring together. Music thumped in the background, bass-heavy and intrusive. "Why were you calling so late?" she asked. "Where are you?" Grant's voice came out steady, controlled. Years of business negotiations had taught him to mask his emotions. "You said you were going to Paige's house for wine night." A masculine laugh echoed through the speaker, too close to be background noise. Grant's blood ran cold as he recognized it instantly. Jonas Morgan, his best friend since college. "Oh, don't be so controlling." Cora giggled, her words swimming in what Grant guessed was several glasses of wine. "We're just having fun at Jonas's place." Paige was busy. "So, tell your pathetic husband how you've been shouting my name all night." Jonas's voice cut through, clear and sharp, closer to the phone now. "Babe, come back to bed. I'm not done with you yet." The phone clattered to the floor on their end, followed by Cora's shrieking laughter and the unmistakable sound of kissing. The call ended. Grant sat motionless, his mind racing through 8 years of memories. Meeting Cora at the morning roast, where he worked part-time during his architecture studies. Her standing order, caramel macchiato with an extra shot, always accompanied by that bright smile and those mesmerizing blue eyes. Their first date in Greenwood Park, sharing dreams over cheap Chinese takeout. Their modest backyard wedding 3 years ago. Jonas standing beside him as best man. Jonas, the friend who defended him from campus bullies during freshman year, who stayed up countless nights helping Grant study for architecture exams, who held Grant's hand through his mother's cancer battle, organizing hospital visits and bringing home-cooked meals. The friend who invested in Grant's struggling architecture firm when banks wouldn't give him a loan. A soft knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. Mrs. Whitman, his elderly neighbor, stood in her floral nightgown, concern etched across her face. "I heard voices," she said softly. "Is everything all right here?" Grant forced a polite smile. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Whitman. Just a work call." She hesitated, wringing her hands. "Grant, there's something I should have told you months ago. I've seen Jonas's car here late at night when you were away on business trips. I didn't want to get involved, but," her voice cracked. "Howard, my late husband, he always said silence in the face of wrongdoing makes us complicit." Grant's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "How long?" "The first time was in April, during that conference you attended in Bristol." Mrs. Whitman's voice trembled. "I'm so sorry, dear. I should have said something sooner." 8 months, Grant said quietly, more to himself than to Mrs. Whitman. He thought back to April, the month Cora had suddenly suggested he take more business trips to expand the firm. The month she started going to more girls' nights and yoga classes. "Would you like me to call someone?" Mrs. Whitman offered. "Your sister Nina, perhaps." "No." Grant's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. "Thank you for telling me, Mrs. Whitman. You should get some rest." After closing the door, Grant walked to his home office. He opened his laptop, pulling up his bank statements, and began documenting every suspicious charge, every unexplained absence, every business dinner Jonas had suggested in the past 8 months. His architectural training had taught him to pay attention to details, to see patterns others might miss. His phone buzzed with a text from Cora. "Staying at Paige's tonight. Don't wait up. Red heart." Grant didn't respond. Instead, he opened his contact list and dialed a number he never thought he'd need. Alina Brooks, a private investigator recommended by a client months ago. He had saved her number as a professional courtesy, never imagining he would use it. Ms. Brooks, this is Grant Underwood. I apologize for the late hour, but I need your services. How soon can we meet? The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of discoveries, each revelation more devastating than the last. Grant maintained his routine, running his firm, attending social functions, playing the role of the devoted husband. But beneath the surface, he was building a case. Elena sat across from him at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town, spreading photographs across the table. They meet 3 times a week, usually at Jonas's penthouse, sometimes at the Lakeside Inn. She slid forward a receipt. Room charges paid with Jonas's corporate card, listed as business expenses. Grant studied the photographs with the same attention he gave his architectural blueprints. What else? Your wife filed for divorce this morning, Elena continued. Her lawyer is Lachlan Cook. They're demanding half of everything, including your firm. Grant's laugh was cold. Jonas recommended Lachlan to her. Of course he did. He took a sip of his coffee. What about their stories? About me being controlling, emotionally distant? They've been carefully laying groundwork. Social media posts showing Cora healing and finding herself. Jonas is playing the supportive friend, the shoulder to cry on. Elena hesitated. Most of your social circle seems to be believing them. Most isn't all, Grant noted. Who's asking questions? Diana Carlson, Jonas's ex-girlfriend. She reached out to me yesterday. Elena pulled out her phone, showing Grant a message. She wants to meet, says she has information about Jonas's pattern of destroying relationships. The diner's bell chimed as a group entered. Grant glanced up to see Pastor Elliot Moore and his wife, along with several members of their church group. The pastor's eyes met Grant's briefly before looking away, his expression a mixture of disappointment and judgment. They're believing Cora's lies, Grant observed quietly. All except one. Elena nodded toward Olivia Fulton, the church's youth counselor, who offered Grant a small, sympathetic smile as she passed. She's been defending you, says her experience as a domestic abuse survivor helps her spot false accusations. Grant's phone buzzed. A text from his younger brother, Trevor. Need to talk. It's important. They met an hour later in a public park. Trevor looked worse than Grant remembered, his hands shaking slightly as he chain-smoked. I knew. Trevor blurted out, unable to meet Grant's eyes. About Jonas and Cora. Jonas. He's been supplying me with pills. Said he'd cut me off if I told you. He laughed bitterly. Some brother I am, right? Choosing pills over family. Grant studied Trevor's hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. How long have you been using again? 6 months, Trevor said. Started right after losing my job. Jonas noticed I was struggling, offered to help. Next thing I know, he's got me by the throat, using me to cover for him and Cora. Does Nina know? No. She's been too busy with her investigation into Jonas's business dealings. Trevor finally looked up. Grant, she's getting close to something big. Jonas has been making calls, asking about her schedule, her routes to work. Grant's expression hardened. Tell me everything you know about Jonas's operation. Every dealer, supplier, drop point. Trevor spilled everything, words tumbling out in a desperate confession. When he finished, Grant handed him a business card. This is the best rehabilitation center in the state. I've already paid for a 3-month program, Grant said firmly. You check in tomorrow. I can't afford. I'm not asking. Grant stood. You're my brother, Trevor. The only way Jonas wins is if he destroys our family completely. That night, Grant received a frantic call from Nina's husband. His sister had been in an accident, her brake lines cut. She was in intensive care, but stable. In the hospital waiting room, Grant sat alone, his mind racing. The pieces were falling into place. Jonas's manipulation of Trevor, the attack on Nina, the systematic destruction of Grant's reputation. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated campaign to dismantle his life, piece by piece. His phone chimed with a text from Cora. "I'm staying with Jonas now. Lachlan will contact you about the divorce proceedings. Please don't make this difficult." Grant deleted the message without responding. He pulled out his laptop and began working on a new project. Not an architectural design, but a blueprint for destruction. Jonas had taught him an invaluable lesson. Trust, once broken, demanded retribution. Grant's descent into darkness accelerated with each passing day. His architecture firm faced mounting challenges as Jonas's influence in the city council threatened to derail the community center project. Former friends crossed the street to avoid him, their minds poisoned by Cora's tales of emotional abuse and controlling behavior. The final blow came on a quiet Sunday morning. Grant found Otto, his beloved rescue dog, convulsing in the backyard. The veterinarian, Dr. Sinclair, confirmed what Grant already suspected: poison. "I'm sorry, Mr. Underwood," Dr. Sinclair said gently. "There was nothing we could do." Grant buried Otto under the oak tree where they used to play fetch. As he patted down the last of the dirt, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It contained only a photo: Jonas and Cora at a restaurant. Otto's collar was visible on the table between them. The message was clear: nothing in Grant's life was sacred or safe. Mrs. Whitman watched from her window as Grant stood over the fresh grave. She remembered how he had rescued Otto 3 years ago, how the dog helped him cope with his mother's death. Making a decision, she picked up her phone. "Alina Brooks. This is Eleanor Whitman about the Underwood case. There's something else you should know." Meanwhile, at the city council meeting, Grant's community center project faced its final hurdle. Jonas's uncle, Councilman Morgan, had rallied significant opposition. The proposed location raises serious environmental concerns, Councilman Morgan argued, reading from prepared notes that Grant recognized as Jonas's handwriting. Furthermore, Mr. Underwood's recent personal issues raise questions about his reliability as a contractor. "Interesting," Councilwoman Maria Garrison interrupted, her voice sharp. "I have here documentation showing that your nephew's company submitted a competing bid for this project, after the deadline, I might add. Would you care to explain this conflict of interest?" The council chambers erupted in murmurs. Grant sat silently, watching the political theater unfold. He had learned that sometimes the best revenge was simply letting your enemies destroy themselves. Later that evening, Grant met with Micah Vaughn, Maria Garrison's brother, and a former Special Forces operator turned private investigator. "Your friend Jonas has connections to some dangerous people," Micah explained, spreading surveillance photos across Grant's desk. "Loan sharks, drug dealers, corrupt officials. He's been using your firm's projects to launder money." "Can it be proven?" Grant asked. Micah shook his head. "Not legally. Not yet. But there's something else." He pulled out a flash drive. "Your brother Trevor wasn't Jonas's only victim. There's a pattern here. Jonas finds people who are struggling, offers help, then uses them to destroy their own families." Grant absorbed the information silently, his mind already formulating plans. The kind, forgiving man who believed in second chances was gone, replaced by someone harder, more ruthless. His phone buzzed with an email from Lachlan Cook, Cora's lawyer. They'd wanted the house, half the firm, and a significant portion of his future earnings, the justification being emotional distress and years of alleged psychological abuse. Grant forwarded the email to his own lawyer, then opened his laptop. On the screen, architectural plans for the community center glowed softly. But in a hidden folder, another set of blueprints was taking shape, not for a building, but for the systematic dismantling of Jonas Morgan's empire. Mrs. Whitman's testimony about Jonas and Cora's late-night meetings had been carefully documented. Olivia Fulton had gathered statements from other church members who witnessed inconsistencies in Cora's abuse claims, and Nina, recovering in the hospital, had uncovered financial irregularities tying Jonas to several failed businesses and suspicious deaths. The pieces were there. All Grant needed was patience and the willingness to be as ruthless as his enemies. That night, as he sat in his empty house, Grant received one final text from Cora. I hope you understand that this is for the best. We just grew apart. He didn't respond. Instead, he opened a new document and began typing. Phase 1. Financial disruption. The architect in him knew that before you could build something new, you had to clear the ground completely. Jonas and Cora had taught him that loyalty was an illusion, trust was a weapon, and revenge was a dish best served cold. As he worked through the night, Grant smiled. Jonas had unwittingly taught him the most valuable lesson of all. In a world of wolves, the worst mistake was showing mercy. Grant Underwood stood in his home office, now transformed into a command center. Photos, documents, and sticky notes covered the walls in an intricate web of connections. At the center hung two photos, Jonas Morgan and Cora Underwood. Red string connected them to various pieces of evidence, creating a visual map of their destruction. You've been busy, Elena remarked, studying the display. She picked up a stack of financial records. Jonas's gambling debts. Impressive research. Numbers tell stories, Grant replied, pulling up bank statements on his laptop. Jonas has been using my firm's projects to launder money for his gambling addiction. Cora helps him manipulate the contracts. Elena raised an eyebrow. That's why you hired Micah. Among other reasons. Grant clicked through surveillance photos. The door opened, and Micah Vaughn entered, his military bearing evident in his precise movements. Speaking of skills, your form is improving. That takedown during training yesterday was nearly perfect. Grant nodded. Self-defense training had become part of his daily routine. 3 hours each morning with Micah, learning combat techniques and surveillance methods. The physical exertion helped channel his rage into something productive. I got something, Micah said, laying out a folder. Jonas has connections to the Vasquez cartel. They've been using construction projects to move product. That's where your brother Trevor got his supply. Grant absorbed the information silently. Can we use this? Not legally, Micah warned. But it explains why Jonas is so desperate for cash. He owes them nearly $2 million. It's not just gambling, a new voice added. Cameron King stepped into the office, laptop under his arm. The young hacker had dark circles under his eyes, a testament to countless nights digging through digital records. Jonas has been skimming from multiple projects, Cameron continued, plugging his laptop into Grant's monitor. He inflates material costs, pockets the difference, but the money doesn't go to his gambling debts. It's being funneled somewhere else. Where? Grant asked, studying the numbers. That's the interesting part. Cameron pulled up a series of offshore accounts. These shell companies are linked to human trafficking operations. Jonas isn't just a homewrecker. He's into something much darker. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Grant's expression hardened. Give me everything. Bank records, communications, any digital footprint you can find. Already on it, Cameron replied. But there's something else you should know. I found recordings, videos Jonas made of his conquests, including Cora. Cameron's voice betrayed his disgust. He's got dozens of videos, different women, all married. He records everything and keeps it as leverage. Grant's jaw tightened. Insurance. Blackmail material. Cameron confirmed with a nod. He's been using them for years. A knock at the door interrupted them. Catherine Bird, Cora's estranged mother, stepped in, looking determined. I brought what you asked for, she said, placing a worn journal on Grant's desk. Cora's diary from high school. It details her relationship with her father, how his betrayal of our family shaped her. Grant opened the journal, scanning its pages. Are you sure about helping us? She's your daughter. Catherine's face hardened. She stopped being my daughter when she chose to become like her father. I watched him destroy our family with his affairs, saw how it twisted Cora's view of relationships. Now she's continuing the cycle. Tell me about her patterns, Grant prompted, recording the conversation. She seeks out strong, successful men, makes them trust her completely, then systematically destroys them. Catherine's voice trembled. It's what she saw her father do to me. In her mind, it's better to be the betrayer than the betrayed. Elena studied the diary. This could be useful in the divorce proceedings. No, Grant said firmly. We hold this in reserve. Jonas thinks he's collecting blackmail material. Let's see how he likes having the tables turned. Micah cleared his throat. Speaking of tables turning, I've made contact with some of Jonas's creditors. They're interested in his recent activities. Good, Grant turned to Cameron. How long until you can access Jonas's private servers? 2 days, maybe 3, Cameron said. His security is decent, but I've seen better. Want me to plant the evidence we discussed? Not yet. Grant studied the wall of evidence. First, we need to understand his complete operation. Everyone he's hurt, everything he's stolen, all his vulnerabilities. He turned to Catherine. Does Cora know about Jonas's other activities? No, Catherine replied. She thinks she's special, that their love is real. She has no idea she's just another pawn in his game. Grant nodded, a plan forming in his mind. Then that's our first target. Cameron, prepare those videos. Catherine, write your daughter a letter, mother to daughter, warning her about men like Jonas and her father. And the cartel connection? Micah asked. We don't touch that directly, Grant said, but anonymous tips to certain interested parties that could be useful. Elena watched Grant with a mixture of admiration and concern. You're playing a dangerous game. No, Grant corrected her. I'm not playing at all. This isn't a game. It's an execution. He turned to the group. Jonas and Cora wanted to destroy my life. Fine. But they're about to learn that some people hit back hard. The plan unfolded with precision. Cameron's anonymous tip to Jonas's creditors about his plan to escape hit like a bombshell. Within hours, Jonas's accounts were frozen, assets seized, and his reputation in the business community began to crumble. Grant watched from his office as Jonas stormed out of the bank, phone pressed to his ear. Through the surveillance equipment Micah had installed, they could hear both sides of the conversation. What do you mean frozen? I need that money. Jonas's voice cracked with panic. Listen, I have payments due. No, you don't understand. These aren't the kind of people who accept excuses. The banker's response was firm. I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan, but given the evidence of financial irregularities, we're required by law to freeze all accounts pending investigation. Grant turned to Cameron, who was monitoring the digital fallout. Status. His credit cards are declining, investment accounts locked, properties flagged for audit. Cameron grinned. He's bleeding money by the minute. A text flashed on Grant's phone from Cora. Jonas is acting strange. He won't tell me what's wrong. Can we talk? Right on schedule, Grant murmured, showing the message to Catherine. She's scared, Catherine observed. When things get tough, Cora always runs back to what's familiar. Should I respond? Grant asked. No, Catherine said firmly. Let her stew. Fear makes her sloppy, makes her question her choices. Micah entered with fresh surveillance photos. You're going to want to see this. Cora's been meeting with Jonas's business partner, Wesley Hughes. The photos showed Cora and Wesley in intimate conversation at a secluded restaurant, their body language unmistakable. History repeating itself, Elena commented. She's already looking for her next mark. Wesley knows about Jonas's illegal activities, Micah added. He's been skimming his own share. If Cora's cozying up to him, she's planning her escape route. Good, Grant finished. Let's help her along. He turned to Cameron. Send Wesley an anonymous email. Include proof of Jonas's embezzlement. Make it look like Jonas is planning to pin everything on him. What about Trevor's testimony? Elena asked. As if on cue, Grant's phone rang. Trevor calling from rehab. Grant put him on speaker. Grant, I'm ready. I'll tell the police everything about Jonas's drug operation. You're sure? Grant kept his voice neutral. This could be dangerous. I owe you. Trevor said, his voice stronger than Grant had heard in months. You got me clean, gave me a second chance. Let me help take him down. Detective Caldwell is here, Elena said, referencing a trusted police contact. Tell her everything. For the next hour, Trevor detailed Jonas's drug trafficking operation. Names, dates, amounts. Elena recorded everything, building the case that would eventually land on the right desks. One more thing, Trevor added before hanging up. Jonas has a warehouse by the docks. That's where he keeps his special records. Blackmail material, proof of bribes, everything he needs to maintain control. Grant exchanged looks with his team. Cameron. Already mapping the security system, the hacker confirmed. Give me 48 hours. That evening, Jonas's desperation peaked at a charity gala. Grant attended solo, playing the part of the wounded husband while gathering intelligence. He watched Jonas and Cora work the room, noting how Jonas's smile tensed whenever someone mentioned business matters. Cora caught Grant's eye across the room. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Doubt? Regret? She whispered something to Jonas and headed toward the ladies' room. Catherine intercepted her daughter in the hallway, their first meeting since the affair became public. Grant watched via the security feed as mother and daughter faced off. You look tired, dear, Catherine observed, her voice dripping with concern. Trouble in paradise. I'm fine, mother. Cora's defensive tone betrayed her uncertainty. Jonas and I are very happy. Of course you are. Catherine smiled sadly. Just like I was happy with your father, right until I found out about the other women. The secrets, the debts. Cora's composure cracked. Jonas isn't daddy. No. Catherine pressed. The gambling, the mysterious phone calls, the way he looks at his secretary when he thinks no one's watching. Or maybe you already know about Wesley's wife. Cora's face paled. What about her? Oh, sweetie. Catherine touched her daughter's cheek. You really think you're special? That you're the first married woman Jonas has collected? Ask him about Paige Hughes, what happened to her after he was done playing his games. Leaving her daughter shaken, Catherine returned to Grant's side. Seed planted. Good. Grant nodded to Cameron, who sat at a nearby table with his laptop. Release the first video. Across the room, Jonas's phone buzzed. He opened the message, his face turning white. The video showed him with Wesley's wife, filmed 6 months ago in his office. Who else gets copies? Elena asked quietly. Wesley, Grant replied. Anonymous email, of course. Let's see how Jonas handles both his business partner and his new lover discovering his games. The evening ended with Jonas making excuses and rushing out, leaving Cora to find her own way home. As Grant watched them leave separately, he felt no joy. This wasn't about emotion anymore, just cause and effect. Actions had consequences. Betrayal demanded a response. Phase 1 complete, Micah reported. His business reputation is in tatters, his romantic life is imploding, and his criminal associates are asking questions he can't answer. And Cora? Catherine asked. Grant watched his wife's car disappear into the night. She chose to play Jonas's game. Now she'll learn the rules the hard way. He turned to his team. Prepare for Phase 2. It's time to dismantle everything they thought they could count on. 3 months into Grant's campaign, Jonas Morgan's carefully constructed world began showing serious cracks. His business partners demanded audits, creditors called in loans, and former friends stopped returning his calls. Grant attended social functions, still playing the part of the devastated husband while quietly gathering intelligence. At one event, he overheard Jonas arguing with Wesley in the coachroom. You think I don't know about the videos? Wesley hissed. About you and Paige. My wife. Jonas. My wife. Keep your voice down, Jonas growled. I can explain everything. Explain it to the SEC, Wesley spat. I've got proof of your embezzlement schemes. You try to pin this on me, I'll bury you. Grant signaled Cameron, who adjusted the hidden microphone for better clarity. Elena, posing as Grant's date, sipped champagne. "Your friend's unraveling," she murmured. "The pressure's getting to him." "Good." Grant watched Jonas emerge from the coachroom, sweat staining his collar. "How's the official investigation going?" "Building momentum," Elena answered. "Trevor's testimony opened doors. We've linked Jonas to 3 overdose deaths through his drug operation." She frowned. "But we're playing a dangerous game. The cartel doesn't like attention. They like betrayal even less," Grant noted, "especially when they learn Jonas has been skimming their profits." Across the room, Cora tried to maintain her social standing, but her smile looked strained, her laughter forced. The anonymous videos had shaken her confidence in Jonas, and Catherine's warnings had planted seeds of doubt. Mrs. Whitman approached Grant's table, her elderly frame concealing a sharp mind and keen eye. "That awful man was arguing with his neighbors again last night. Such language. And the things they were shouting. About money and drugs. I recorded everything, just like you asked." "Thank you, Mrs. Whitman." Grant touched her hand gently. "You've been invaluable." "They hurt you," she said simply. "And I stood by once, said nothing. Never again." Micah joined them, his posture relaxed but alert. "We've got movement at the warehouse. Jonas is moving files, destroying records. He's running scared." "Desperation," Elena observed. "It makes people sloppy." "Let him run," Grant said. "Fear will make him vulnerable." Later that night, Grant met with Sophie Delgado, a wealthy client who had seen through Jonas's manipulation. Her brother, Darius Delgado, another investigator, had uncovered disturbing connections. "Jonas isn't just trafficking drugs," Darius explained, spreading photos across Grant's desk. "He's involved in human trafficking. Young women promised modeling contracts, brought into the country, then sold to the highest bidder." Grant studied the evidence. "Can we prove it?" "Not yet, but one of his victims is willing to talk." Darius slid forward a photo of a young woman, Maria Vasquez. "She escaped 3 months ago, has been hiding, afraid to come forward." "Protection?" Grant asked. "Already arranged," Darius nodded. "She'll testify when the time comes." Grant added the information to his war room. The walls told a story of corruption, betrayal, and exploitation. Jonas Morgan wasn't just a man who stole someone's wife. He was a monster who destroyed lives for profit and pleasure. A text message lit up Grant's phone. "Cora, we need to talk. About Jonas. About everything." "She's breaking," Catherine said from the doorway. She had been monitoring her daughter's social media, watching the facade crack. The videos, the rumors, Jonas's increasing violence. Cora was realizing too late what kind of man she chose. "Too late for regrets," Grant replied, deleting the message without responding. "Much too late." The next day, Cameron succeeded in breaching Jonas's private servers, uncovering years of blackmail material. "He recorded everything," Cameron reported, disgust in his voice. "Affairs, bribes, drug deals. Used the videos to control people, forced them to participate in his schemes. Upload copies to secure servers," Grant instructed, "then make sure certain interested parties get anonymous tips about their existence." The impact was immediate. Jonas's remaining allies began distancing themselves. Pastor Moore called an emergency church meeting after receiving proof of Jonas's manipulation. The congregation sat in stunned silence as the pastor spoke. "I owe you all an apology," he said, voice heavy with regret. "More importantly, I owe Grant Underwood an apology. We were deceived, led to believe lies about a good man while protecting a predator in our midst." Olivia Fulton stood next. "I tried to tell you. As someone who survived real abuse, I knew Grant wasn't what they claimed. Jonas Morgan is the abuser, and I have proof." She shared testimonies from other victims, women Jonas had seduced, recorded and blackmailed, men whose marriages he destroyed for sport. Trevor, 6 months sober and clear-eyed, addressed the group next. "Jonas used my addiction to keep me quiet. Used pills to make me betray my own brother. But not anymore. He went on to detail Jonas's drug empire. The church meeting turned into a flood of confessions. Others came forward with their own stories of Jonas's manipulation. The wall of silence cracked, then shattered. Grant's phone buzzed. Catherine Bird requesting an urgent meeting. She was at their usual cafe, watching footage of Jonas threatening Cora. "She's reaping what she sowed," Catherine said, her voice hard. "Just like her father did." "Any regrets?" Grant asked. "About helping destroy your own daughter?" Catherine's laugh was bitter. "She stopped being my daughter when she chose to become like him. This is justice, not tragedy." "Jonas is making moves," Micah said, stepping in. "Large cash withdrawals, ticket searches. He's planning to run." "Let him try," Grant replied. "The cartel's watching his accounts. They know exactly what he's planning." By week's end, Jonas was running out of options. He made desperate calls to old allies, but no one wanted to risk their own necks. Each frantic attempt to cover his tracks only sealed his fate. The careful network of lies he'd built was crumbling. The trap Grant had meticulously crafted began to spring. Cameron burst into Grant's office, laptop in hand, excitement on his face. "You need to see this. I finally cracked Jonas's private server, the blackmail videos, the financial records, everything." "Show me," Grant said, leaning forward. The screen filled with dozens of video thumbnails labeled with dates and names. Jonas had recorded everything. His affairs, his business dealings, his threats. Among them were videos of Cora, caught in compromising positions she hadn't realized were being filmed. "Send them to her," Grant instructed. "Anonymous email. Include the documents showing Jonas's plans to pin his financial crimes on her." "What about his other victims?" Cameron asked. "All of them, one by one. Let them see what kind of man they've been protecting." Micah Vaughn entered, his expression grim. "The cartel's asking questions about their missing money. Jonas tried selling information about their operation to a rival group. They're not happy." "Good." Grant pulled up a document on his screen. "These are Jonas's gambling debts. Make sure his creditors get copies, especially the ones outside legal channels." Within minutes, Jonas's phone was ringing nonstop, each call more threatening than the last. They listened as his world imploded. "I need more time," Jonas shouted. "Just give me a week. I can get your money." The response, in rapid Spanish, made him pale. Cora stormed into their apartment, waving her phone. "What is this? You've been recording me, recording us." "Baby, I can explain," Jonas insisted. "Explain what? That you're planning to frame me for your crimes? That you've been blackmailing other women?" Cora's voice cracked. "I left my husband for you. I destroyed my life for you." Jonas grabbed her arm. "You don't get to play innocent now. We're in this together." Grant pressed a button on his phone. Within minutes, police sirens approached the building. An anonymous domestic disturbance call. They watched as officers burst into the apartment. Jonas, caught mid-rage, spun to face them. The sudden movement caused a bag of white powder to fall from his pocket, planted earlier by Micah. "That's not mine," Jonas protested, as officers moved to restrain him. "Sir, we're responding to reports of domestic violence," one officer said. "But now we're going to need to search the premises." Cora saw her opportunity. "He's been threatening me. He made me help him with illegal business deals. I have proof." She frantically pulled up the incriminating emails she'd received anonymously from Cameron. Catherine Bird stepped off the elevator, surveying the scene with cold eyes. "Right on time, Mother," Cora pleaded. "Tell them how Jonas manipulated me." "Oh, I'll tell them everything," Catherine replied. "About how you willingly participated in destroying good men's lives. How you knew about Jonas's other women but didn't care, as long as you got what you wanted. How you're exactly like your father." The officers looked between the women, adding another layer to the investigation. Detective Caldwell, carefully chosen through Alina's connections, took statements. Grant watched it all unfold through the surveillance feed, expression unchanging. This was the culmination of months of planning, each piece positioned perfectly for maximum impact. Councilwoman Garrison was on board, pushing for a full investigation into the community center project. Councilman Morgan's interference would be exposed. What about the other evidence? Grant asked. All handed over to the proper authorities, Alina confirmed. The cartel connection, the trafficking operation, the blackmail videos, everything except what would implicate our friends who helped. Cameron typed rapidly at his keyboard. Jonas's hidden accounts are being drained as we speak. His criminal associates are taking what they think he owes them. By morning, he'll be broke. Through the feed, they watched Jonas being led to a police car, ranting about conspiracies, and being set up. Each accusation only made him look guiltier. Cora sat in the back of an ambulance. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. I want to contact Grant, she told the sympathetic officer. He needs to know I'm sorry. That I understand now. No, Catherine interrupted. You've lost the right to ask anything of him. Face your consequences like an adult, for once in your life. Grant turned off the feed. Phase 1 of the final act is complete, Micah said. Jonas is running scared, his victims are speaking out, and his empire is falling. Grant nodded. Now we let him and Cora face the aftermath of their own choices. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Jonas Morgan was led in, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of his usual designer suits. 3 months had passed since his arrest, each day bringing new revelations about his crimes. Grant sat in the back row, watching the proceedings with cold satisfaction. Beside him, Alina squeezed his hand. The state called Catherine Bird to the stand. Her testimony was devastating. Jonas's pattern of manipulation, the financial crimes he forced Cora to participate in, the lives he destroyed for profit and pleasure. And your daughter's role in all this? The prosecutor asked. Cora chose to become like her father, Catherine replied. She knew what Jonas was doing to others. She helped him destroy Grant Underwood's reputation with false accusations. She deserves whatever punishment the court decides. Evidence mounted throughout the day. Trevor testified about the drug operation. Paige Hughes revealed the blackmail scheme, and Maria Vasquez bravely described the trafficking side. Jonas's composure cracked further. He shouted accusations, claimed conspiracies, threatened witnesses. Each outburst only solidified his guilt. During a recess, Pastor Moore approached Grant. The church has established a support group for victims of manipulation and betrayal. We'd be honored if you'd speak. Grant considered. Have Trevor do it. He's better suited to help others heal. The pastor nodded, understanding Grant wasn't interested in healing. He wanted justice. The verdict came swiftly. Jonas faced multiple federal charges, his sentence measured in decades. Cora, as an accomplice, received a shorter but still significant term. In the courthouse lobby, reporters swarmed Grant for comment. He gave them what they wanted. The story of a successful architect betrayed by his wife and best friend, who focused on rebuilding his life while justice took its course. Later, in his office, Grant opened a letter that had arrived that morning. Inside was a photo from his college days, him and Jonas, young and smiling. He added his own message. You taught me that trust, once broken, can never be repaired. Thank you for the lesson. The photo and note were delivered to Jonas's cell that afternoon. Grant's architecture firm flourished in the aftermath. The community center project, nearly derailed by Jonas's interference, became a symbol of resilience. Councilwoman Garrison ensured its completion, turning it into a haven for those rebuilding their lives. Trevor thrived in his recovery, channeling his experience into helping other addicts. Nina's expose on Jonas's criminal empire won journalism awards. Mrs. Whitman mentored young women, teaching them to recognize manipulation. Elena moved from investigator to partner in both professional and personal spheres. Their shared understanding of justice created a bond stronger than mere affection. Was it worth it? She asked one evening, reviewing plans for a new project. Grant looked around his office. The wall that once displayed evidence of betrayal now held architectural awards and community recognitions. "They thought they could destroy me," he replied. "Instead, they gave me the motivation to rebuild something better, something stronger." He picked up the latest prison report on Jonas. Apparently, life behind bars wasn't agreeing with him. Cora's letters begging for forgiveness remained unopened in a drawer. "The best revenge," Grant continued, "isn't just watching your enemies fall. It's rising so far above them that they're forced to watch your success from the depths of their own failure." He had learned lessons about trust, justice, and the price of betrayal. His newest designs incorporated those lessons, creating spaces that brought people together while remembering the strongest foundations were built on unforgiving stone. The man who once believed in second chances was gone, replaced by someone who understood that some betrayals demanded payment in full. Justice had been served, not through violence or direct confrontation, but through the careful orchestration of consequences. 10 years passed. The Underwood Architecture Group now occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise, its sleek logo visible across the skyline. Inside his corner office, Grant Underwood reviewed plans for his latest project, a nationwide chain of rehabilitation centers funded by the profits from his community center initiatives. His assistant placed a folder on his desk. "The Foundation's quarterly report, Mr. Underwood." The Grant Underwood Foundation for Survivors of Betrayal had grown from a small support group into a national organization, helping thousands rebuild after manipulation and abuse. Grant opened the folder, scanning the numbers. The Foundation's success mirrored his own transformation, from victim to victor. At 44, he was known as much for his philanthropic work as for his architectural innovations. His story inspired others to fight back against abusers and manipulators, though few knew the full extent of his calculated revenge. Elena called, finalizing the security contract for the new centers. 5 years earlier, she had become Elena Brooks Underwood, his partner in every sense. Their intimate wedding had been attended only by those who stood by him during his darkest days. Grant's phone buzzed with a text from Trevor, 10 years sober today. "Speaking at the center tonight. You coming?" Trevor's recovery was now a beacon of hope for others. After completing his rehabilitation, he earned his counseling certification and ran the addiction program at the original community center. His testimony had helped convict Jonas, inspiring countless others to break free from manipulation. Grant replied, "Wouldn't miss it." Bringing the twins, 4-year-old daughters Sarah and Rachel, named after 2 women who helped expose Jonas, were living proof that life could be rebuilt after betrayal. Elena understood his initial reluctance to have children, his fear of new vulnerabilities. She showed him that real strength came from building something worth protecting. A news alert popped up about Jonas Morgan. After 12 years in federal prison, he had been denied parole again. Psychological evaluations cited his continued refusal to accept responsibility and his paranoid delusions about conspiracies. Grant checked the monthly report from his contacts. Jonas was a shadow of his former self, muttering about elaborate plots and invisible enemies. Cora's fate was different, but no less final. Released after 8 years, she found herself blacklisted from former social circles. Catherine Bird ensured that every attempt Cora made to reinvent herself was met with cold shoulders. Last Grant heard, she was working as a waitress in a small town, 3 states away. Her pleas for forgiveness still went unanswered. Micah Vaughn, now head of security for the Underwood Group, stepped in. Background checks are complete on the new Foundation staff. All clean except one. Former connection to Wesley Hughes. Grant's face hardened. Declined the application. No second chances for anyone tied to that circle. Wesley Hughes had died in prison 5 years into his sentence, unable to cope with his fall from grace. Paige Hughes rebuilt her life, helping the Foundation identify predators like Jonas. A reminder popped up. Dinner with Mrs. Whitman. The elderly widow still hosted weekly gatherings for what she called her revenge family. Nana. Now a Pulitzer winner would be there too. Her near-fatal accident only fueled her determination to expose corruption. Cameron King's tech company occupied the floor above Grant's offices. Together, they created an unmatched network of surveillance and protection. Olivia Fulton expanded the church's outreach programs for survivors, and Councilwoman Garrison became a state senator on an anti-corruption platform. Catherine Bird served as the foundation's senior advisor, using her experience to guide others away from manipulative relationships. That evening, Grant stood in the community center auditorium, watching Trevor address a room full of recovering addicts and survivors. The building that Jonas once tried to derail had become ground zero for a movement of healing and justice. 10 years ago, I was a pawn in someone else's game, Trevor told the crowd. My addiction made me vulnerable to manipulation. I betrayed my own brother to feed my habit. But Grant showed me that rock bottom can become a foundation if you build on it the right way. The audience included many whose lives Jonas had touched. Each success story was another brick in the wall of justice Grant built from the ashes of betrayal. Afterward, Grant walked the halls. Architectural awards lined the walls, alongside photos of success stories. Addicts who got clean, survivors who rebuilt, families reunited after escaping manipulation. His revenge hadn't just been about destruction. It had created a legacy of protection and empowerment. Still satisfied? Elena asked, joining him with their daughters in tow. Grant watched Sarah and Rachel run to hug their Uncle Trevor, their joy reminding him why he fought so hard. Satisfaction isn't the goal anymore. This is about making sure what happened to us can't happen to them. Later that night, Grant sat in his home office, reviewing the day's reports. A small photo frame held the college picture he'd once sent to Jonas in prison. Its message remained clear: trust, once broken, could never be repaired. But from that broken trust, he built something stronger, an unbreakable network of survivors and protectors. His revenge had evolved into a mission of prevention and protection. Somewhere out there, another Jonas was destroying lives for sport. Another Cora was betraying sacred trusts. Grant's organization would be ready to expose them, stop them, and help their victims rebuild. The Foundation's motto, displayed in every building, summed up the lesson he had learned and now taught others. Trust must be earned, betrayal must be answered, and true justice requires unflinching resolve. His daughter's laughter echoed from the garden, where they played under Elena's watchful eye. Mrs. Whitman sat on her porch next door, keeping her own quiet vigil. Micah's security team maintained their discreet presence, and Cameron's systems monitored for potential threats. This was Grant's real victory, not just surviving betrayal, but creating a fortress of purpose from the rubble of broken trust. The man who once believed in forgiveness now built a legacy of justice that would outlast any single act of revenge. Grant closed the photo album and opened his laptop. There was work to be done. Manipulators to expose, victims to protect. The game of trust and betrayal continued, but now he wrote the rules. And rule number 1 never changed. Some betrayals demand a response that echoes through generations. The boy who once trusted blindly had become a man who trusted strategically. The husband who had been betrayed had become a protector. And the architect who lost everything had built something greater than he ever imagined. A monument to the truth that the best revenge isn't just destroying your enemies, but building an impenetrable fortress from the very stones they tried to break you with.